So the first thing I want to do is to set up some context. I work for a major financial organization with about 1,500 people worldwide, of which about 600 of us are IT staff, and about 400 of those are developers. So we're definitely not a startup anymore. We're quite big, and in such a big environment, people come and go all the time. We have living drinks pretty much every week, which is awesome, but it's not so good for the knowledge transfer. But this is the point where you actually, or where we actually receive these hot potatoes. So let's say that we have a team, we have a big team, and in this big team, the team lead decides to leave. So the whole team gets actually split up between different other teams or different areas of the business or whatever. So for our case, if we're trying to define a hot potato is, let's say these teams get split up. So one team inherits all the people that were working for the team, and another team inherits all the software. So in this time, in this occasion, we were the lucky guys that inherit the software and not the people. So not only we had to maintain what we had before, but we also had to maintain software that we didn't have much knowledge of. My team, I've been quite lucky. I've landed in a very good team, which is actually more or less independent. We own pretty much everything. We own our software, we own our builds, we own practically the whole process except for the production environment, which is really, really good in such a big company. But unfortunately, that's not the case for everyone. So one of the pieces of software we inherited is this big hot potato that is a software that is critical for the company. It handles all the communications between the company and the clients, either via push notifications, text messages, email, etc. It's part of the old release cycle, so there is not really a build plan, there is no deployment process, everything is just done a bit old way. It's big, it's bad, it's ugly, it's not something you really want to maintain. And it's hot potato because whenever you are dealing with it, all you want to do is chuck in all the functionality that people don't really know where it goes, put it there, and as soon as you can, handle it to the next team that's going to maintain it, so it's no longer your problem. It also, if you think about that, you will be, yeah, well, it's not bad. I mean, it's bad, it's big, but it works, right? As long as it works, it's not that much of a problem. But that's normally not the case. Normally what happens is it's really flawed, it's full of bugs, it's full of problems that are going to come over to you, they're going to bite you in the ass because it's not properly tested, it's not doing things in the right way. It's barely working, you hold it like that, you make it work, and when you're done, you pass it on to the next team. We try not to have a policy of blaming people, so we're not looking for the person that actually started all this process, but at some point we'll find him. Anyway, so when I say it's really flawed, what do I mean by it's really flawed? Okay, one of the things it has is, as I mentioned, it has multiple responsibilities. One of the things it does is it manages client preferences. Not all of the client preferences, but it manages all the communication client preferences. So let's say that I'm a normal user for a trading platform, and what I want is I want to receive all the major market alerts or all the major market changes via push notification, but then I want to receive all my price alerts via SMS, and then I want to receive everything else via email. All of those preferences are handled inside something called communications, so it's sort of like that should not really be part of my responsibilities. As communication, it does send emails, SMSs, and push notifications, as I mentioned, but it's not handled as in I receive a message, I grab the number, the phone number, or I grab your email, then I forward it to you. What we have is we have an XML template, we receive the information from the XML template, grab one, put the other one together, mix it all, and then send it. So that's some extra responsibility in there. It also manages all the mobile device tokens. So an average person in this room changes mobile phone about once every year, maybe once every 2 years, plus then you will change your tablet every 3 or 4 years. So let's say since a smartphone started, how many devices have you on average? 5 to 10, more or less, more or less. So, and how many of those devices are either in your drawer or someone else has it, or you just don't own it anymore. You lost it while you move flat or whatever you do. If people don't actually say, oh, I'm not having this device anymore, please remove it from my list, we're still sending more and more messages, more and more push notifications, more and more communications into devices that no longer exist that build up into our queue. So it's pretty bad. It's pretty ugly. I just want to make a big case out of it's bad and it's ugly. Then this hot potato is part of the old release cycle. I said we own our builds, we own our deployment, so we can change one line of code and have that in production in about, I would say, some 20 minutes for most of our products, which is not bad. Could be better, but it's not bad. But this one here is part of the old release cycle. The old release cycle means that, let's say I make a tiny change here, yeah, at the beginning of our release cycle, which will be, I don't know, a one-liner, two-liners, a small bug fix, yeah? So you put it here, and then that remains in your snapshot in test for 4 weeks. Every one of these arrows is a week, yeah? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks after you've actually done your code change and maybe write some unitary test and you think it's all good, perfect. So then that will be moved, that will be tagged and moved into UAT, into our UAT environment. And there is a lockdown there. So for 2 weeks, you won't be able to make any changes unless there is some sort of critical bug that makes the whole thing fail, right? After the 2 weeks, if everything goes well, then you have a week to change minor things like, oh, this doesn't really look 100% what we wanted it to look, or there is a missing field here. Okay, fine, make the changes. If I have the time in a week, then I'll push the change into UAT and it will work. So once QA is happy with it, they will say, okay, now we're going to chuck it into demo. So both demo and production are environments that are really production. So what we do, every 6 months, we switch between demo and production. So it has to be production ready completely. So let's say everything goes well in here. And then when we move it into production, for some weird reason, there is a bug here, just here, at the end of almost 9 weeks that you finish what you were doing here. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. Coffee, I think. Anyway, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. Do you think any of us is going to remember what they did 8 weeks ago or 9 weeks ago and have to be able to come here and make a change? There's no way that's happening. And if it happens while you're putting it in production, then you have to overrun all of this release cycle. So effectively, you don't use that. You just go, make a quick fix, and then test it very quickly, put it in UAT, test it very quickly, and pass it into production right away. And then you will catch up with all the other versions. That's mighty bad. So this is something we definitely want to run away from. And also, as I mentioned, it's really slow. So there are ridiculous maintenance costs. I will get there. There is no audit on sent messages. And there is a huge downtime on deploy. Okay, so all of these flows, if you go to business and say, okay, there is all of these flows that we're not happy with and it takes us a long time, business will come to you and say, but it works, right? It's been working for years. What's the problem now? So all of a sudden you inherited the product and you're going to be like, oh yeah, well, this is bad. We want to change it. It's going to take us about 6 months to rewrite everything. That's a no-go. Okay, so we're going to hit business where it hurts them, which is maintenance costs. Let's say, well, my team is actually composed of 5 people. There is an architect, there is a team lead, there are 2 senior developers, and a junior developer. This tiny guy here is the junior developer. I was looking for a bald guy, but there's none. So, and somebody actually commented that we use the same hairdresser as Hitler. But anyway, that's all the guys there were. So anyway, not entirely my fault. So let's say, on average, every developer makes between 1 and 2 points per day, which is more or less our velocity. And company numbers say that for every senior developer, the company spends £500 per day. The junior developer will make a little bit less, or will be a little less costly, but the architect will be more costly. So more or less, let's say an average of £500 per person. So in a week, a person can make between 5 and 10 points, or a senior developer can make between 5 and 10 points, and spend £2,500 or cost the company £2,500. At the point where we are today, I ran quickly through the numbers. So on average, it's been 3 senior developers full-time solving bugs and making the functionality work properly, memory leaks, tiny little bugs, missing fields, etc. So that means between 15 and 30 points per week and around £7,500 per week. Since we inherited the project until today, we have spent £135,000 in maintenance and something between roughly 300 and 500 points worth of not developing other things because we were maintaining it. Show that to the business and they will be like, why haven't you started before? No set of messages. As I said, we are a very big financial company. We are highly regulated by the authorities. That means that everything we do actually requires to know that we're doing it right, because we can get either, we normally have to compensate clients economically when something goes wrong. Normally it's a little bit of money, but if we have any of the issues that Gary mentioned before, you can imagine the company will probably go bankrupt. And I think the company's worth about 2.4 billion at the moment, so yeah. So we have 2 possible scenarios. The first one is that the client receives a message and we don't know. That's not too bad, you would think, because, okay, you get extra messages, or you get messages and you're like, yeah, you got it. Why would you care? Okay, let's say that the client receives a market movement that is not true. And the client panics because we tell him that FTSE is going down 100 points per minute, and he panics and presses the sell button. Let's say that the client, very hypothetically, has £1 million worth of FTSE, and we're telling him that he's losing about 10% of it per minute. He's going to click the button sell, and he's going to lose £100,000, roughly. When the client actually goes online and checks that FTSE was going up and he sold, and we send him that, he's going to be like, why did you make me sell? I just lost £100,000 worth of the market going up. The company actually will have to economically compensate. So that's pretty bad. But what's even worse is that the client doesn't receive a message and we don't know. And that has happened. That has happened several times. Recently, with all the issues that's been going on in China, I don't know if you've probably been aware of it, the market's gone a bit nuts. When the market goes down about 5%, we send all of the clients that line up for major markets a message saying, the market's going down, it's plummeting. Here's the alert, take it. And many clients actually came up to us saying, we haven't received these messages. What's going on? I just lost a certain amount of money. And we had to economically compensate a lot of people with very little money. But if you multiply £10 by, we have about 100,000 customers. We didn't compensate all of them, but you can think that the numbers are actually a bit messed. Also, as I mentioned, it's really flawed as in downtime to deploy. It takes us 40 minutes to restart one of the servers, just one of the servers. So that definitely makes us really sad. That makes a really sad potato. Not only hot, but really sad. Imagine every time you have to go in production, it takes you 40 minutes. So you put down your maintenance screen, and then you say, okay, it's going to take me 40 minutes to turn down one server, check that it actually works for about 5-10 minutes, and then another 40 minutes for the other server, and then another 10-20 minutes to check that everything actually went well. That means that we have 2 hours downtime every time we want to deploy into production. As continuous delivery practitioners trying to reach 0 downtime deployments, this is just like the worst case scenario ever. And I remind you that it took us about 20 minutes to deploy anything into production before that. So it's about time to do some refurbishment. So we approached the refurbishment in 3 different areas. First one was re-architecture. It was a mess. It was a big mess. And I'll let you know, well, you've seen some of the parts, and you see how we approach this change. Also, we tried to reach zero downtime deployment. And of course, we wanted to detach from that 8 to 9 weeks or release cycle. If I make a change, I want to know whether it works as soon as possible. So, refurbishment time. Re-architecture, that's the first bit. So what do developers do when they gather together to do some re-architecture? As a colleague of mine always says, we don't get paid unless we draw at least 10 square boxes per day. So what we actually did was draw squares. There's squares behind the post-its, but there were squares there. So what we did was, okay, how many different functionalities do we have? Okay, so we have functionality here, functionality there, things that we want to extract. So the way we approach it is microservices. What we tried to do was to separate, since we had SMSs and emails and push notifications, and then we had that bit where the XML got mixed and then send it to whatever. What we tried to do is, okay, let's make them as small as possible, extract as much core functionality into the main communication service, and then extract all the rest. Fortunately, because we thought that's going to be huge. I mean, you have spaghetti code everywhere and things all entangled and whatnot. How do you approach that? Fortunately, and it may not sound as a good thing, we had a new flow coming into us. And I don't know if you read Martin Fowler's strangle pattern approach. It basically says that strangle vines go around trees, and when they go around trees, what they do is they flourish while killing the tree that they're growing around. So the idea was, let's develop these new flows around the core functionality that we already have, and when we need a change over anything else, we'll extract it and put it into the new functionality or into the new vines that we have around the main functionality that will technically strangle the old way or strangle the old code that we no longer use. So we'll have everything in these new flourishing vines and a rotten core that we'll no longer use, and at some point we'll be able to extract. Reaching zero downtime deployment, you've probably seen this a million times already. We had two options. One was the canary release, the other one was blue-green. We actually, I'm not going to stop to explain all of this because I'm already running out of time, but you know what each of one is. So since we only had two servers in production, we could not actually implement blue-green deployment, but canary release was not an option because it took us 2 hours to deploy every single time until we actually managed refurbishing everything. So as I said, we had business on our side. Having business on our side meant that we could go to business and said, we're going to need 2 extra machines. We need 2 extra machines because we want to reach blue-green deployment. And what we want to do is be able to deploy in dark and then change the pointers. And actually what we have here will work right away. We will know right away whether it's working or not. But in the meantime, what we did was canary release. We got to deploy one server, test that it works, and if it doesn't work, roll back, but we still have the other server active, and we can play with those things. So we had to reach an agreement on that. So incrementally, of course. And then we wanted to detach from the old release cycle. The problem of sticking to the old release cycle was, apart from the big thing, or trying to get away with it, is you've seen that we were trying to do some microservices, some good practices, some re-architecture there. So I went there and built my new Bamboo plan for communications. And I was like, oh yeah, that's awesome because it's going to deploy here, it's going to deploy there, and it's going to do that. And I'm going to try and write a little script so I don't actually have to manually wait the 40 minutes and check if it works, and then, which was brilliant. But I realized a bit too late that we didn't have the extra machines ready. So we didn't have the extra machines ready. So we had a wonderful Bamboo plan that we could not use at all. The only thing we could do is build, tag it, put it into test, and the rest is just sitting there for no particular reason. The good thing is that when the new machines arrive, because this is still work in progress, but we're making progress, I swear we're making progress, is that everything will be already in place. So, since this was a 20-minute talk, I could not really get in depth into all of the things, but I thought since we hadn't finished, maybe for a future evolution of this talk, we'll get a little bit more into all of these details and come up with all of the exact solutions that we use. But we learn a few things while we're doing it. The first one is business on your side. It's a really good thing to have. The fact that it took only a week between pitching all the changes we wanted to do in communication and getting the approval, that's absolute record time in the company. That means that everyone was on board. The lead architect was on board, the head of PO was on board. Everyone was saying, just go and do it because it's costing a lot of money and it's costing us a lot of time. Deal with your own stuff. It says stuff there. It doesn't matter whether it's your baby or if someone is handling you a difficult teenager, it's yours. Now you own it. And since you own it, deal with it. Don't think, oh, I'm going to check all the stuff here because I know at some point this is a hot potato, somebody else will handle it. People will hate you for life if you handle them something that you don't want to maintain. If you don't want to maintain, it's your problem, deal with it, and make sure that when you handle it to someone else, at least is maintainable. And also, use an incremental approach. We tried to do it once at the beginning, and there was no way that worked. We ended up thinking, oh, I made the changes in the Baboon plan, but it's no longer usable, so whatever, just do little by little. The Vine approach is actually a really nice way to do all the functionality while you can actually build all the pieces around it. And finally, just be proud of what you've done. It doesn't matter if you work for a month and you take a step back and you think, this is really bad. I'm not happy with this. Just take a step back, roll up your sleeves, and do a little bit more development, spend a little bit more time on it, and just make sure that once you handle it to someone else, it's something that you can be proud of. I'm sure no matter how you handle it to the next person, they will think you're an idiot. But at least you're a proud idiot, and you definitely enjoy what you have done. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for listening. So I think we have
time for questions.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
If anyone has a question. I know it's very specific to what we do, but yeah.
Just the mic.
You obviously getting business on side helped. Did you manage to get them on side so quickly purely by quoting dollar costs at them, or did you get them drunk, or?
Okay, going to the pub actually helps a lot. But we actually made a mistake once, and it was a costly mistake. But funny enough, that mistake brought the business even more on board. So when we inherited this project, we didn't know that it took 40 minutes per server to restart. So we had a critical bug in production, and what we did is create a hotfix, put it into UAT, test it very quickly. We jump over the release plan, put it in UAT, test it very quickly, it worked, and we check it into production. All of a sudden, while production servers are restarting, we had a long queue of people coming over to talk to us. And it was like, oh, I'm getting really popular here. But then I saw the faces of the people, and I thought, maybe that's not the sort of popular I want to be. And they were like, okay, what you actually have done is clients are not going to receive price alerts for the next 2 hours. With the market being as it is, you can imagine that that is not a brilliant idea. So at some point, my manager's manager came to talk to us and said, what happened? And it's like, yeah. So it's like, look, this happened, we didn't know, but there was a critical bug, and there are other bugs there that are actually going to be critical, and we need to deploy that. It's like, well, you have to come up with a solution. So we presented a solution that was an incremental plan, which means we not only work in refurbishing this because we have other products, but we'll also deliver a little bit of functionality in all the other products, as well as at some point, the cost of this maintenance, it's going to get lower and lower and lower because we're getting better and we're having less bugs. So yes, it's not easy to have business on board, and we were quite lucky as well, but actually a number of coincidental things and being quite reasonable in our approach is what brought business on board, and a certain amount of alcohol as well. Anyone else? I think we're running out of time as well. Not sure.
Okay, cool.
Okay, well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much.